Hilchos Issurei Mizbeach Perek Chamishi, the laws of the prohibited entities to the Mizbeach, chapter 5. We're moving to a specific category of things that are not allowed to be brought into the Mizbeach. Not animals anymore. Till now we're speaking about animals. Today we're going to be speaking about other ingredients, or other things that cannot go on the Mizbeach. The Rambam begins with two specific examples that we actually mention every morning. In Korbanot, one of the paragraphs, we mentioned this concept. Halacha Aleph, So'er udvash asurin legabe hamizbeach. So'er means a leavening agent, something chametz. Classic example would just be a loaf of bread. But any dough that's been left to rise and would be considered chametz for the laws of Pesach cannot be brought on the Mizbeach, and neither honey. And by honey, we don't mean literally honey only. We mean sweet substances. So honey, what they call tree sap, sweet sap that comes out of trees, is also considered dvash. These are forbidden to end up on the Mizbeach in any shape or form. The isuran bekol shehin. Their prohibition is in the smallest amount. Usually we say kazayit, the olive-sized portion. This is even the tiniest amount cannot end up on the altar. Shenemar, as it says, ki chol sa'ir v'chol dvash le'saktiru v'gaimer. Any leaven, any honey, you shall not bring, etc., on the Mizbeach. But you're only liable if you offered them together with a sacrifice, or you offered them alone with the intent that they should be a sacrifice. But if you just threw it on the Mizbeach with no specific intent alone, then you don't get the punishment. Doesn't matter if you offer them themselves or a mixture containing them. If you ended up bringing them both, you'll get lashes for each one individually. If you offer them both together, you only get one set of lashes, because they were both communicated in one prohibition. It says together, kol sa'er v'kol devash lo saktiru. Like we had the other day with the esnan zaino mechir kelev, it says one time lo savi. So if you bring them both, you only get one set of lashes. Halacha beis nafal mehem kol shu bakteires. If even the slightest amount of sweetener or leavening agent falls into the kteires, nifsala, the whole incense becomes disqualified. V'im hiktir mimena b'heichal loika. And if you offer it inside the heichal, where you usually offer the incense, the kohen gets lashes. But in this case, ve'ein haktara pchusa mikazayis. Offering needs to be no less than an olive-sized portion. So if you have an olive-sized portion of the incense and in there is honey, then it's a problem. What we say every morning in the Korbanot, we talk about this. We say that ilu haya noisin b'kartiv shel devash. You should know, if you would put the tiniest amount of honey in the incense, nobody could withstand the smell. It would be so sweet. It would be incredible. So why don't we put in honey? Because Torah says, no sa'ir, no dvash. And here we see that. You literally get lashes for it. Halacha gimel. Hela sa'ir dvash bifnei atzman la mizbeach. What if a person were to offer a leavening agent or honey on its own, but he didn't do it for the intent of a sacrifice, he did it for the intent of wood, meaning fuel. It should be fuel for whatever is burning on the Mizbeach. Potter, he's exempt. Shenemar, because it says in the very next verse, Ve'el hamizbeach lo yalu l'reach nichayach. Don't offer up this chametz and this honey for a sacrifice which is supposed to give a pleasant aroma, a pleasant smell to Hashem. L'reach nichayach yatamale. Aval tamale l'shem eitzim. Don't bring it up for a typical sacrifice which causes a good smell to Hashem, but you could bring it as wood. Afilu hiktir davar she'ein ra'y lahaktara. Even if you offered something which is not fit to be offered, bidvash ay bisa'er, together with honey or with chametz, and we'll soon see a list of these things. Hoyil v'hu mina karban laika. As long as it's part of a sacrifice, which part of it was offered, even if that specific part is not meant to be offered, you get lashes. Keitzad, what does that look like? Hamalem mibsar chatas v'asham. Let's say a person would offer part of the meat of a sin offering or a guilt offering. We'll see in the next set of laws how the offerings work. Every time you bring a sin offering or a guilt offering, part of it went to the Mizbeach, but part of it went to the Kohanim to be eaten. Let's say you took the part that was meant to be eaten and you put it on the Mizbeach. or the meat of any other lower level sacrifice, which also is supposed to be eaten. Or the leftover part of a flour offering. Usually you have a flour offering, the Kohen takes what's called a kaimetz, 3 fingers full, puts it on the Mizbeach, the rest goes to the Kohanim. But you took the rest and you offered it on the Mizbeach. The leftover part of the barley offering, brought on Pesach. Or a sin offering that was a bird, which is not meant to go on the Mizbeach. Or from the lechem apanim, the weekly showbread, or the 2 special breads brought on Shavuos. Or the small amount of oil that was used in the purification process of somebody who has tzaras. If a person brings an olive-sized portion of any of these things, mixed together with some honey or chametz, whether he actually brings it all the way up to the altar, or he only puts it on the ramp, the kevesh is the ramp, for that you get lashes. Even though these specific things shouldn't be brought on the Mizbeach, it's supposed to be eaten. Since they're called karban, they're part of a sacrifice, chayav alein. You're liable to them. Shenemar, as it says, karban reishis takrivu oisam laHashem. You should bring them, or you could bring them, as a first fruits offering to Hashem. That's okay to bring honey or to bring wheat as like bikurim, but not on the Mizbeach. Halacha hey, v'chein asur lahaktar ala Mizbeach, davar mikol dvarim elu she'einon ro'yin lahaktar. Forget the mixture of the chametz or the honey. These things, this list we just gave, things which shouldn't be brought on the altar, it's a prohibition to bring them on the altar. The meat of the sin offering, the guilt offering, leftover flour offerings, and the like. Because we have a tradition that says, it's a play on the words. This verse is also used to communicate that any sacrifice that has 2 parts, one that you bring to the fire and one that you bring or given to the Kohanim, once you put the part that belongs to the fire on the fire, whatever remains is prohibited to be put on the Mizbeach afterwards. If somebody, God forbid, offers limbs of a non-kosher animal on the Mizbeach, a donkey, a horse, a camel, whatever it is, loike, you get lashes. Even though the only way we know this is prohibited is from an inference from a positive commandment. Shaharei Nemar, because it says, Min ha-tehoira echoil, or min ha-tehoira hakrev. You should only eat from what is pure, and eat and offer from what is pure. Here the pasuk says, Kol tzipar tehoira teichelu, when it's kosher you can eat it. Some say that Rambam is alluding to another verse, where it says, whenever an animal is split hooves, oisa teichelu, you can eat it. And also the verse says, and the Rambam will soon quote the verse, that you can only bring on the Mizbeach things that are kosher, which implies hatmei aloi toichav aloi takriv. That implies that a non-kosher animal should not be eaten, or should not be brought on the altar. But why is here special? Usually if you only infer a prohibition from a positive commandment, you don't get lashes. Why here do you get lashes? The same way the whole idea of eating non-kosher food is only, or non-kosher meat, is only inferred from a positive commandment, and nevertheless you get lashes for it, as we explained. So the same thing applies to the offering. What if you bring the limbs of a kosher beast, not a kosher animal? The only sacrifices that are offered are cows and sheep and goats. What if you put a deer? It's kosher, but it's a chaya. So you only transgress a positive commandment, you don't get lashes. How do we know it's a positive commandment? Shanemar, here's the verse. Literally the very second verse of the Chumash Vayikra, the book about sacrifices. It says, when you bring a sacrifice, min ha-behema, min ha-bakar, or min ha-tzayin takrivu es karbanchem, from a domesticated animal, specifically cattle or sheep, you bring your sacrifice. Ha min ha-chaya olei takrivu. That means that from the beasts, you don't bring, even if they're kosher. When you have a negative commandment deferred from a positive commandment, you only consider it a positive commandment and you don't get lashes. Person robs an animal from a friend, either by geneva or by gzela. theft and robbery. Theft, according to halacha, is stealthily, quiet, in the middle of the night. And gzela is broad daylight. You really just rob him, you grab the stuff from him. If you offer the stolen sacrifice, pasul is disqualified. V'akadosh baruch hu soinai. Hashem hates it. Shenemar, as it says, soinei gazel be'oila. Hashem hates robbery when it comes to burnt offerings. Ve'ein tzarich leimar she'einu miskabel. Needless to say, it doesn't get accepted. Only if the original owner despaired of ever getting it back, then it's kosher. Because Yush, once you have despair, it transfers ownership. Even if we're talking about a sin offering, where the Kohanim are going to end up eating the flesh, the meat. So it looks worse. If an animal is totally burnt, so you could say, fine, if the owner is despaired, let it be kosher. But here, you're going to end up feeding Kohanim holy meat in the name of stealing, because the owner is despaired. It doesn't matter. It's kosher. But for the protection of the Mizbeach, the rabbi said, if you do have a sin offering which was stolen, if many people know about it, doesn't atone even if the owner is despaired. So people shouldn't say, the Mizbeach eats stolen goods. So to a burnt offering. What if you don't steal an animal that was unsanctified? You steal an animal that was already sanctified. A friend put aside an animal for an oila, for a burnt offering. This person steals it and brings it, offers it on the Mizbeach with no particular stipulation. It works for the original owner because you didn't say that I'm doing it for myself or for someone else. You said it for the original friend. Flour offerings and the flour that comes together with other offerings, libations, you don't bring it not from untithed produce, nor from new grain before you bring the Omer offering on Pesach, not from grain that's mixed with truma, and needless to say, you don't bring it from fruits in the first 3 years or mixtures in the vineyards. That's a mitzvah that comes through a sin, which Hashem hates. If you brought them, they don't become holy enough to be able to be a sacrifice, but they are holy enough to be considered disqualified sacrifices. And they'll have the law of a disqualified sacrifice. It has to be redeemed, etc. Yud, all flour offerings, even though we just said that you shouldn't bring them from new grain before the Omer, the Passover offering, really you should wait till Shavuos, when they bring the 2 breads. Because it says about the Shtei Alechem, and they are Bikurim, first to Hashem, which means they should be the first. Nothing should be before them. But if you did bring it as long as after the Omer, it's okay. You can bring the Nesachim, the accompaniments to a sacrifice, even from that which is muktzeh, was originally set aside, you weren't planning to drink this wine, etc. On Yom Tov, it's okay. Yud Aleph, mitzvah sasei, limloyach kol ha-karbonos, koidem she'al ha-mizbeach. Talking about the Mizbeach, there's another prohibition, the prohibition of not salting a sacrifice before you bring it up. So the first that Rambam brings the positive commandment. The positive commandment is, you have to salt every sacrifice before they go up to the Mizbeach. Shenemar, as it says, al kol karboncha takriv melach. On all of your sacrifices should you bring salt. This is the special chamber that was called the Lishkas HaMelech, the chamber of salt. They used to salt all the sacrifices in here. There's nothing that goes on the altar without salt, except for wine, blood that's sprinkled on the Mizbeach, and the wood. Every other thing was salted. That's a tradition. It's not clear in the verses, but it's passed down, and that's how we know. Not just sprinkling some salt. You're supposed to salt it very well. Like a person who salts something for roasting, in which you turn the piece over. You salt both sides. If you salt it very little amounts, even 1 grain of salt, it's okay. If you offered it with no salt at all, loika, you actually get lashes. Shenemar, as it says, v'loi sashbis melach brisa lekecha me'al min chasecha. Do not omit, do not cancel the usage of salt that Hashem made a covenant with from your flour offerings. Even though you get lashes, carbon kosher v'hurtza. Whatever you did is kosher, it's atoned. Chutz min mincha she'amelach me'akev b'kmitza. Except for a flour offering, over there salt is essential. Shenemar v'leisash bris melach bris lekecha me'al minchasecha. Torah singles out the word mincha, flour offering. Therefore, we know it's extra strict. Yud Gimel. Hamelach shemilchin b'kol ha'karbonos mishel tzibur. The salt that was used for sacrifices was paid for by public funds. Kimei ha'etzim, like the wood. No individual could bring, some salt from my house. I'll bring the salt. No. There was 3 places where the salt was stored. Belishkas hamelech, in this chamber of salting. Ve'al gabe hakevesh, and on the ramp up to the Mizbeach, there was a pile of salt there. Ubereisha shel Mizbeach, and at the top of the Mizbeach as well, there was some more salt. Belishkas hamelech hayu milchin oiris hakadashim. In the chamber of salt, they would salt the skins, the hides of the sacrifices. On the ramp, they would salt limbs or pieces of meat. On the top of the altar, they would salt other things. Kaimetz, that's the 3 fingers full of the flour. Levaina is frankincense. Any flour offering that's burnt. The oila sa'if, and the burnt offering that was burnt also would be salted on top of the Mizbeach.